Please give a round of applause to Radhika ji. Radhika ji is, I'll give you a quick introduction to the audience here. She is the titular Rani of the erstwhile state of Baroda. But more than her title, she is known and adored, if I may say, as well, for the work she does, which is conservation of, she's a textile revivalist and conservationist for two kinds of sarees, Chanderi and Baroda Shalu. We're going to speak to her today about preservation and what it takes to do preservation through, say, the sartorial graces of the Maratha royal families. Tell us about it. Why Chanderi and why Baroda Shalu?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having me here. To come to your question immediately, the Baroda Shalu was woven in Banaras, but it was an intrinsic part of the Maratha sartorial choices, as was the Chanderi. These were not only worn by women, they were not just saris, but they were dupattas, which were worn ceremonially by men over the swords. Just to give you a brief, that a sword would be carried by Kshatriya men to the wedding, and I think a lot of people do even now. But it is always with a scarf or a dupatta to indicate that the sword is being carried in a moment for an auspicious occasion, and it's being borne in times of peace, and it is not a threat. So there would always be a golden fabric that would embellish the sword. So that was a fabric. The pagadi or the safas or the turbans were made of Chanderi fabric as well, or woven in Banaras. So there was much utility that came from the fabrics of Chanderi or Baroda Shalu. Chanderi was worn by, of course, a lot of Maratha royal families. The Baroda Shalu receives its name because of the exclusive patronage of the Baroda family. And of course, the others would also get a pick from it once the royal families had their share of the saris that were commissioned. So these looms were exclusively working for the Baroda family, and every time there was a wedding or a birth or an auspicious occasion, new designs would evolve, and then the saris would be bought by a middleman to Baroda. So these are very, very important aspects of, it was just not for vanity, but there was tradition and functionality to the usage of those fabrics, and a lot of communities and families existed on and sustained themselves on the patronage from royal families like Baroda.
Yes, of course. Ma'am, you've been working with the artisans also quite a bit, giving them access to international markets, national markets, of course. Tell us about that and the challenges that you face in it.
Lot of challenges. The thing is that unfortunately the craft sector is entirely unorganized. It is the second highest employment generator in our country after farming. However, it is entirely unorganized. Even today, there's a report by the World Bank in 2003. I haven't unfortunately seen any research being done after that on this. But just to look at the education levels, about 90% of women that constitute the unorganized craft sector are uneducated. About 50% of household heads that are in the craft sector are uneducated. So how are we expecting them to be integrated into our organized sector of livelihood? They don't have access to transport. They are not able to accumulate enough money to take loans to buy raw materials and order and take orders in bulk. And then they get hit by pandemics and things like that, where they don't have the resources to buy material and they don't have access to markets to even sell what they have. So they're extremely challenging circumstances with which the artisan sector is working. It is extremely resilient. We have craft which is over 5,000 years old, still existing in our country, and I have the greatest pride and respect for the craft community, but it needs to percolate to other people as well, and there has to be sensitization and awareness created for the craft sector. They have been badly hit by demonetization and GST. They don't know how to operate GST, so there are many challenges. They get hit by droughts. They get affected by even something like Manrega. Manrega is a lot of artisans who don't have employment are coming under Manrega, and you find them on the roads, laying roads and breaking rocks. And these are the hands and skills which are actually the repositories of our culture. Everything that we hold today tangibly as culture in our country, whether it is a garment, whether it is a carpet, whether it is music, everything has to do with craft and culture. And in the olden days, the patronage came from two places. It was the royal families and temples. But over time, the government is trying their best, but people like you and me now need to handhold the communities of craft for our future generations.
So that is where her role comes in. I mean, the erstwhile royal families who used to patronize these arts, but you do that by lending your persona to it. That is something which is why at the outset I said that she's respected greatly and adored by the people of Baroda who know her work very well. In addition to that, ma'am, also tell us about the potential that these handicrafts, Baroda Shalu and Chanderi in particular, but Indian handicrafts in general, have on the global scale, and what needs to be done to achieve that potential?
I think there's a lot of intervention that needs to come in. So considering that our population, the mass that we have, and it's the second highest employment generation, it only constitutes about 1.2% of the craft in the world reaching out. So our exports, that's a huge potential we need to look into. Design intervention needs to come into craft. The good news about craft is that it is sustainable, it is eco-friendly, because it's been there for centuries. It has always been harmonizing our ecology. So it is not a strain on our ecology. But we need to be able to bring in design intervention and have a direct interface between the artisans and the end consumer. What happens is the artisan is sitting in very remote areas in the villages, and they have no idea what you and I require in a flat in Bombay. And they continue to make craft in the proportions that they have been taught by their forefathers. So, someone needs to come in and tell them how that same skill can be adapted to make something which would be pocket-friendly and user-friendly for the rest of the world, which is now moving to cities. And it's going to be a great benefit if we are able to do that, because India is anyway a big brand now. We are talking about being globally efficient, and if we are able to carry this lineage outside, it would be terrific. It would also mean that a lot of migration which happens from villages to cities will stop, because they will have the employment and income coming in their very little villages and hutments. So my biggest request would be that everyone learns and sensitizes themselves towards craft, and the communities that survive on craft, they coexist. Our crafts survive because of these communities, and these communities survive because of craft. It's a very fine balance. And who says craft has to be tribal? This is a Chanderi which we are weaving. This is a sari that we have revived from our old saris, and it's the most comfortable garment I can wear. So I think we all need to take pride in our culture, in where we come from, in our roots. I think as much pride we take in wearing a designer label, we should take as much pride in wearing a garment or a textile from our region, which is what makes us unique.
Yes, of course. It's something that you literally wear your identity on your sleeve and be proud of it. Moving on from your work with handicrafts, and let's look at the person that you are. Another cause that she associates with is the LGBTQ community and their empowerment. Can you speak a little bit about that? Why the cause and what next?
So during the lockdown, I was working with the different communities that had been affected by the pandemic, those who had lost a family member who was earning, rickshawalas, vegetable vendors, so on and so forth. And that's when I read a small snippet of an article saying 500 rupees ki rahat for the transgenders. So honestly, it had not even struck me till then because they're so invisible to us. And then I started exploring where are the LGBTQI communities in my city. And then I was able to identify the ghettos and segregated quarters that they were living in and align myself with a couple of NGOs that were working there. And I was able to reach out to about 250 families and give them dry rations. And that's when a kind of a relationship developed. I started inviting them into our organization, which is over 110 years old, but been working exclusively for women rights and women skill building. I opened those doors and invited the queer community to come in and start training. Today I have teachers and students from the community, and which propelled me to then start a cafe where which gave an opportunity to people from all marginalized communities to come and work. So of course I have the LGBTQI, I have HIV positive people, I have widows, I have elderly people, I have disabled. The idea is to all those who feel distanced by society, find a space to be creative, to be able to connect with society, and to be able to earn a livelihood with dignity. And thank you.
Again, the person, very, very intriguing about you is your journey from what we call a normal, non-royal upbringing to moving into possibly one of the biggest palaces in the country right now, in a real palace, Lakshmi Vilas Palace. We will see the video later. Tell us about how your life changed and how you have adapted to it.
So I come from a princely family myself. But my father was an IS officer, is an retired IS officer. So he was pragmatic enough to change with the times and embrace democracy. He's today 87. So he was one of the foremost people from royal families to take up a government job. And therefore I had an upbringing which was extremely well balanced between my traditional royal roots as well as a very egalitarian intelligentsia upbringing in Delhi. And I think that helped me navigate and have my feet firmly on the ground, but at the same time to be look beyond barriers and be able to connect with people for who they are. So I'm very, very grateful for that. And yes, I was my childhood was very, very. I mean, I traveled by public transport. We had budgets, and I would go and buy vegetables in the market. So it was, it was you could scale up and scale down as much as one could. And I think that was the idea. My parents brought up, ladki kahan jayegi, has to be able to adjust in every situation, and that's how I think I've been able to adapt.
And adapted very well indeed. With this, we come to the end of this session. We will be happy to know that we still have 2 minutes to go, so everybody will be thrilled that we are getting inching closer to the dinner. Thank you very much, ma'am. It was indeed a pleasure having you here.
Thank you for having me.